Section 7 of A Daughter of the Sioux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Ken Campbell. A Daughter of the Sioux by General Charles King. Chapter 7. Blood Will Tell. As Webb had predicted, even before 9 o'clock came prompt, spirited response from Laramie, where the colonel had ordered the 4 troops to prepare for instant march, and had bidden the infantry to be ready for any duty the general might order. From Omaha, department headquarters, almost on the heels of the Laramie wire, came cheery word from their gallant chief. "Coming to join you. Noon train today. Cheyenne, 1:30 tomorrow. Your action in sending Ray's troop approved. Hold others in readiness to move at moment's notice. Wire further news, North Platte, Sidney, or Cheyenne to meet me." So the note of preparation was joyous throughout the barracks on the eastward side and mournful among the married quarters elsewhere. But even through the blinding tears with which so many loving women wrought, packing the field and mess kits of soldier husbands whose duties kept them with their men at barracks or stables, there were some at least who were quick to see that matters of unusual moment called certain of the major's staunchest henchmen to the office, and that grave and earnest consultation was being held, from which men came with somber faces and close-sealed lips. First to note these indications was the indomitable helpmate of old Wilkins, the post quartermaster. She had no dread of his account, for rheumatism and routine duties as the official in charge of Uncle Sam's huge stack of stores and supplies exempted her liege from duty in the field, and even while lending a helping hand where some young wife and mother seemed dazed and broken by the sudden call to arms, she kept eyes and ears alert as ever, and was speedily confiding to first one household, then another, her conviction that there was a big sensation bundled up in the bosom of the post commander and his cronies, and she knew, she said, it was something about Field. Everybody, of course, was aware by 8 o'clock that Field had gone with Ray, and while no officer presumed to ask if it was because Ray or Field had applied for the detail, no woman would have been restrained therefrom by any fear of Webb. Well he realized this fact, and dodging the first that sought to waylay him on the walk, he had later entrenched himself, as it were, in his office, where Dade, Blake, and the old post surgeon had sat with him in solemn conclave, while Bill Hay brought his clerk, barkeeper, storekeeper, Pete, the general utility man, and even Crapod, the half-breed, to swear in succession. They had no idea who could have tampered with either the safe or the stables. Closely had they been cross-examined, and, going away in turn, they told of the nature of the cross-examination, yet to no one of their number had been made known what had occurred to cause such close questioning. Hay had been forbidden to speak of it, even to his household. The officer of the day were sworn to secrecy. Neither Wilkins nor the acting adjutant was closeted with the council, and neither, therefore, could do more than guess at the facts. Yet somebody knew, in part at least. The trend of suspicion was at once apparent to Webb and his counselors when, about 9 o'clock, he took Blake and Dade to see those significant bar shoe hoof prints. Every one of them had disappeared. "By Job," said Webb, "I know now I should have sent a sentry with orders to let no man walk or ride about here. See, he used his foot to smear this, and here again." There, in a dozen places, were signs of old Indian trailers read as they would read any open book, places where, pivoting on the heel, a heavy foot is crushed right and left into yielding soil of the roadway, making concentric circular grooves and ridges of sandy earth, where, earlier in the morning, Dan's and Harney's dainty hoof-prints were the only new impressions. For nearly 50 yards had this obliterating process been carried on, and in a dozen spots until the road dipped over the rounded edge and, hard and firm now, went winding down to the flats. Here Webb and Dade and Hay returned, while Blake meandered on, musing over what he had been told. "It's a government heel, not a cowboy's," had Hay said, hopefully the print of that pivoting lump of leather.
"That gives no clue of the wearer," answered Blake. "Our men often sell their new boots or give their old ones to these hangers-ons about the post. So far as I am concerned, the care of which the print had been erased is proof to me that the Major saw just what he said. Somebody about Hay's place was mighty anxious to cover his tracks."
But a dozen somebodies besides the stableman hung there at all hours of the day, infesting the broad veranda and barroom and stores, striving to barter the skin of a coyote, skunk, or beaver, or, when they had nothing to sell, pleading for an unearned drink. Half a dozen of these furtive, beetle-browed, swarthy sons of the prairie lounged there now, as the elder officers and the trader returned, while Blake went on his way exploring. With downcast eyes he followed the road to and across a sandy watercourse in the low ground, and there, in 2 or 3 places, found the fresh imprint of that same bar shoe, just as described by Webb. Then, with long, swift strides, he came stalking up the hill again, passing the watchful eyes about the corral without a stop, and only checking speed as he neared the homestead of the Hays, where once again he became engrossed in studying the road and the hard pathway at the side. Something that he saw, or fancied that he saw, perhaps a dozen yards from the trader's gate, induced him to stop, scrutinize, turn, and, with searching eyes, to cross diagonally the road in the direction of the stables, then again to retrace his steps and return to the eastward side. Just as he concluded his search and once more went briskly on his way, a blithe voice hailed him from an upper window, and the radiant face and gleaming white teeth of Nanette Flower appeared between the opening blinds. One might have said he expected both the sight and question. "Lost anything, Captain Blake?"
Nothing but a little time, Miss Flower," was the prompt reply, as without a pause the tall captain, raising his forage cap, pushed swiftly on. "But I found something," muttered he to himself between his set teeth, and within 5 minutes more was again closeted with the post commander. "You saw it?" asked Webb. "Yes, 3 or 4 places down in the arroyo. More than that, where's Hay?" He broke off suddenly, for voices were sounding in the adjoining room. "Here with Dade and the doctor." Then, but Blake got no farther. Breathless and eager, little Sandy Ray came bounding through the hallway into the presence of the officers. He could hardly gasp his news.
"Major, you told me to keep watch and let you know. There's a courier coming hard. Mother saw him, too, through the spyglass. She said they see him, too, at Straber's, and she's afraid."
"Right," cried Webb. "Quick, Blake, rush out 6 men to meet him. Those devils may indeed cut him off. Thank you, my little man," he added, bending down and patting the dark curly head, as Blake went bounding away. "Thank you, Sandy. I'll come at once to the bluff. We'll save 'em, never you fear." In less than no time, one might say, all Fort Frayne seemed hurrying to the northward bluff. The sight of tall Captain Blake bounding like a greyhound towards his troop barracks, and shouting for his first sergeant, of Major Webb almost running across the parade towards the flagstaff, of Sandy rushing back to his post at the telescope, of the adjutant and officer of the day tearing away towards the stables, where many of the men were now at work, were signs that told unerringly of something stirring, probably across the Platte. As luck would have it, in anticipation of orders to move, the troop horses had not been set out to graze, and were still in the sunshiny corrals, and long before the news was fully voiced through Officers' Row, Blake and 6 of his men were in saddle, and darting away for the ford, carbines advanced the instant they struck the opposite bank. From the bluff Webb had shouted his instructions. "We could see him a moment ago," for 6 field glasses were already brought to bear. 6 miles out, far east of the road. Feel well out to your left and head off any of Straber's people. 3 of them have been seen galloping out already." "Aye, aye, sir," came the answering shout as Blake whirled and tore away after his men. There had been a time in his distant past when the Navy, not the Army, was his ambition, and he still retained some of the ways of the sea. Just as Webb feared, some of Straber's young warriors had been left behind, and their eagle-eyed lookout had sighted the far-distant courier almost as soon as Sandy's famous telescope. Now they were hastening to head him off.